early 1970s. Gyms back then didn't hide what they were. Iron was exposed. Chalk hung in the air like fog. Mirrors were cracked, floors scarred, and respect was measured in plates, not words. This was a place built to celebrate mass, where size spoke before effort ever got a chance. On that afternoon, the loudest presence in the room wasn't the music or the clanging steel. It was a man, 300 pounds of him. A bodybuilder whose body looked carved rather than grown. Shoulders like architecture, arms thick enough to make sleeves irrelevant. He moved slowly, deliberately, the way men do when the room already moves for them. People noticed when he laughed. They noticed when he spoke, and when he looked at Bruce Lee, he didn't bother hiding his amusement. Bruce had come to train, not to observe. He was dressed plainly, body lean to the point of looking unfinished next to the mountains of muscle surrounding him. He didn't stretch theatrically. He didn't test his strength for the room. He warmed up quietly, joints moving through precise ranges, breath steady, attention inward. To most people there, he didn't look like he belonged. That's what triggered it. The bodybuilder leaned against a rack, arms crossed, smiling in a way that invited laughter. He said it loud enough for people to hear, loud enough to land. He said Bruce was nothing but bones. He said there wasn't enough there to matter. He said size decides reality, and reality had already spoken. A few people chuckled, others looked away. This wasn't cruelty in their minds. It was hierarchy. Gyms often mistake hierarchy for truth. Bruce didn't react immediately. He finished his movement. He exhaled. Then he turned. Calm, not offended, not defensive. He asked a question instead of answering. He asked what the weight was for: strength, looks, or control. The bodybuilder laughed harder. He said control comes from mass. He said when you're 300 pounds, physics does the rest. He said 5 seconds would be more than enough to prove it. Bruce nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't posture. He said 5 seconds was enough for clarity. That's when the room shifted. Not dramatically. Subtly. People sensed that something unscripted had entered the space. The bodybuilder pushed off the rack, confident, not angry, enjoying the attention. He said he wouldn't hurt Bruce. He said he'd just show him what weight means when it decides to move. Bruce agreed. No ring, no mats, just open gym floor, the kind that punishes mistakes without commentary. Bruce told him to grab him. Any grip, any way. The bodybuilder stepped in and reached, hands like clamps, expecting resistance, expecting to feel muscle push back against muscle. He felt neither. Bruce didn't tense. He didn't oppose. He shifted. That was the first second. The grip closed, but not on authority. Bruce turned his frame just enough that the bodybuilder's force no longer pointed where he thought it did. It poured forward into space. Bruce had already vacated. The bodybuilder adjusted instinctively, dropping weight, trying to crush forward. Second 2. Bruce stepped inside the adjustment, not colliding, not forcing, but borrowing momentum. His hips rotated beneath the bodybuilder's center of gravity, shoulder aligning under mass at an angle that didn't argue with strength. It redirected it. Second 3. The bodybuilder felt his balance tilt, not fall, tilt. That moment is dangerous. Tilt is when the body realizes it has committed to a direction it can't cancel. He tried to widen his stance, but his feet arrived late. Second 4. Bruce's hand touched the elbow, not gripping, just guiding. His other hand anchored briefly at the wrist, not strength, placement. The bodybuilder's muscles fired hard, but they fired in opposition to themselves, power spilling sideways instead of down. Second 5. Bruce stepped, turned, and released. The sound wasn't explosive. It was final. 300 pounds met the floor, not slammed, not thrown, simply relocated to a place it no longer controlled. The impact echoed because mass had lost permission to remain upright. Silence followed. The bodybuilder rolled immediately, instincts intact, eyes wide not with pain but disbelief. He pushed himself up to a knee, breathing hard now, not from effort but from shock. He looked at Bruce as if the floor had betrayed him. Bruce stepped back instantly. No pin, no follow-up, no demonstration of dominance. He had already finished. The room didn't erupt. It didn't cheer. People stood still, trying to reconcile what they had just seen with what they believed. 300 pounds doesn't just fall unless something fundamental goes wrong. The bodybuilder stood slowly, brushing chalk from his hands, laughing once, not to save face, but because laughter was the only thing left that didn't feel broken. He asked Bruce what just happened. Bruce answered simply. He said mass is potential, not authority. He said authority comes from position. He said when force loses alignment, even the strongest body becomes heavy in the wrong way. The bodybuilder nodded slowly. He wasn't humiliated. He was recalibrating. He said he hadn't felt any strength. Bruce said that was the point. Strength announces itself when leverage is late. People started breathing again. What stunned everyone wasn't that Bruce Lee had taken down a much larger man. Wrestling gyms see size disparities solved daily. What stunned them was how little effort it took. No strain, no explosion, no visible exertion. Just timing, angle, and release. The insult from earlier didn't return. The bodybuilder shook Bruce's hand. Not performative. Genuine. He said something quietly that only a few heard. He said bones shouldn't move mountains. Bruce smiled and said mountains move when they lose balance. After that, the gym felt different, not quieter, more attentive. Lifters adjusted stances. People noticed foot placement. Weight felt heavier when moved carelessly, lighter when aligned. No one talked about just bones anymore. The phrase had lost meaning. Bruce returned to training. He didn't lecture. He didn't explain further unless asked. He believed explanations without experience decay quickly. Experience sticks. The floor had already explained everything necessary. The story would grow later, as stories always do. People would say Bruce humiliated the bodybuilder. Others would say the bodybuilder attacked recklessly. They would add strikes that never happened. Drama is easier to sell than clarity. The truth was quieter. 5 seconds didn't prove Bruce was stronger. They proved strength isn't what people think it is, and that lesson once felt doesn't fade easily. The impact of those 5 seconds didn't end when the bodybuilder stood back up. It lingered, quietly rearranging assumptions in a room built on repetition. Gyms thrive on repeatable truths. Lift this much, eat this way, grow this fast. The certainty is comforting. What Bruce Lee introduced without speeches, without confrontation, was uncertainty of a productive kind. The kind that forces observation instead of imitation. The bodybuilder felt it first, not as embarrassment, but as curiosity. He moved differently afterward. His stance widened and narrowed with intention instead of habit. He tested grips against air, feeling where his weight traveled when he reached. He had always known balance mattered, every lifter does, but balance had been secondary to mass. Now mass felt like something that needed permission to function. He asked Bruce questions later, quietly, without the audience. He asked how someone so light could move someone so heavy without strain. Bruce answered the same way he always did, plainly. He said weight amplifies mistakes. The bigger the mass, the smaller the margin for error. He said strength without alignment is loud and inefficient. He said alignment without ego is quiet and decisive. That idea traveled. Other lifters began experimenting. They noticed that when they braced poorly, weight felt heavier than it should. When joints stacked correctly, loads moved smoothly. This wasn't mystical. It was biomechanics made visible. Bruce hadn't invented it. He had demonstrated it with clarity most people avoided. The phrase, just bones, disappeared from the room's vocabulary, not because it was offensive, but because it was inaccurate. Bones, after all, are levers. Muscles pull. Joints direct. Force follows lines whether people believe in them or not. Bruce's body had simply obeyed those lines without arguing. Strength culture often mistakes accumulation for mastery. More plates, more mass, more intensity. Bruce didn't deny accumulation. He contextualized it. He believed that growth without awareness creates fragility. The bigger the structure, the more catastrophic the collapse when alignment fails. That belief extended far beyond the gym floor. People began to notice how Bruce moved when nothing dramatic was happening. How he stood while listening. How he shifted weight before turning. How his breath never fought his motion. There was no wasted effort, No excess tension. He wasn't conserving energy out of fear. He was conserving it out of respect for his body and for reality. The bodybuilder absorbed this lesson deeply because it challenged his identity without attacking it. Bruce never said size was useless. He said size needed guidance. That difference preserved dignity while opening curiosity. Dignity is the gateway to learning. Humiliation closes it. Weeks later, the bodybuilder would explain the encounter poorly to friends. He'd say Bruce didn't feel strong. That phrase confused people. They expected strength to feel like resistance. Bruce's strength felt like absence of obstruction, absence of delay, absence of struggle. That absence is unsettling if you equate effort with effectiveness. Bruce believed that most people are addicted to effort because effort feels like proof. If you're tired, you must be working. If you're straining, you must be progressing. He rejected that logic. He believed true efficiency looks almost lazy from the outside. That belief made him unpopular with people who equated suffering with virtue. The gym environment slowly adjusted. Trainers began cueing alignment before load. They corrected feet before adding plates. They emphasized breathing patterns during lifts. Injuries decreased. Progress became steadier. No one credited Bruce openly. They didn't need to. Bodies don't require attribution to learn. Bruce's philosophy dismantled a common myth that power equals dominance. Dominance, he believed, is a byproduct of timing and position, not intention. When you arrive early enough, you don't need to announce yourself. That applied to conversation as much as combat. Bruce rarely raised his voice. He didn't need to. The bodybuilder later admitted that what shook him wasn't being taken down. Wrestlers and grapplers had done that before. What shook him was how little Bruce seemed to care about winning. There was no hunger to dominate, no desire to prove superiority. The act felt instructional, not competitive. That reframed the entire exchange. Bruce had a rule: stop when understanding arrives. Anything beyond that is ego. Ego, he believed, contaminates truth. The moment you push to humiliate, you lose clarity. He stepped away precisely when the lesson had landed. That restraint made the lesson permanent. Over time, the story grew in predictable ways. People inflated the bodybuilder's size. They added strikes. They added insults. They needed the drama to justify their attention. Bruce would have dismissed those versions gently. He knew that people who need drama are rarely interested in truth. The truth was simpler and therefore harder to accept. Alignment beats mass. Awareness beats aggression. Timing beats tension. That truth applies everywhere. In business, people try to overpower markets instead of positioning themselves within them. In relationships, people force outcomes instead of reading timing. In personal growth, people add habits instead of removing interference. Bruce's lesson wasn't about fighting a big man. It was about how force behaves when ego stops interfering. Bruce often said that the enemy is not the obstacle, but the way you approach it. Large obstacles magnify poor approaches. Small ones hide them. The bodybuilder was a large obstacle. His size didn't create the problem. It revealed it. The gym floor, impartial and unforgiving, approved. Bruce left that day the same way he always did, without ceremony. He didn't collect respect. He generated it by refusing to ask for it. That refusal is rare. Most people demand recognition when they feel right. Bruce trusted reality to do the recognizing. The bodybuilder continued training, stronger in a quieter way. He never lost size. He gained efficiency. He moved more confidently, not because he felt invincible, but because he understood where his weight belonged. Understanding reduces fear because it reduces guesswork. Other gyms would repeat the lesson in their own dialects, some through wrestling, some through yoga, some through rehabilitation after injury. Alignment traveled because it solved problems without argument. It didn't care about philosophy. It worked. Bruce Lee didn't defeat a bodybuilder that day. He defeated a misunderstanding. Misunderstandings are harder to knock down than people because they resist correction. This one fell in 5 seconds because it was confronted directly, physically, without cruelty. That is why the moment endures, not as a tale of humiliation, but as a demonstration of truth. 5 seconds were enough, not to prove superiority, but to reveal structure. And once structure is revealed, pretending otherwise becomes exhausting. That exhaustion is where growth begins. Bruce Lee never tried to be understood by everyone. He understood reality instead. And reality, when approached without ego, always answers honestly whether the question comes from 300 pounds of muscle or a quiet man made of just bones.